But with that, Grace, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for being here. And for those of you who don't know by now, Grace is a graduate of the COEX program here at Heller, and is a pretty big cheerleader and very helpful in the career office. So we're really grateful to you, Grace. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Thank you, Bryan. I'm always grateful for the chance to be in Heller spaces, and it's fun for us all to get to share with you about what we're up to. So I'll hand it over to my colleague Hasi, who's going to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace, and thank you so much, Bryan, for inviting us as a team to sort of present and talk to everyone today. So just to give a brief overview of what we have planned today, we will start off with some team introductions from our presenters today, and we will dive into sharing more information that is hopefully useful to you about organizations, around our mission and current work, and then also introduce the project we collaborate on. But before that, would really invite you to engage with us in the chat by typing your name, your field of study, or your designation, and where you're calling in from today. And so as we kind of continue to share that in the chat, I'll also continue to monitor if there are any questions that come up, and we'll have a space at the end to really dive into Q&A. To kick us off, I'll start with myself with introductions and then hand it over to our presenters. I'm Hasi Edema. I'm a program coordinator at CDA Collaborative Learning, and I'm calling in from Boston today. I'm part of the SAS team that's here today, and I support Grace on different aspects of the project, but also wear different hats within CDA, especially diving into the intersectionality of humanitarian development and peace-building nexus, and related to research from a locally led standpoint. And with that, I'll hand it over to our lovely SAS team. I don't know if any one of you want to go first.
I can round off the CDA team and then we can hand it over. But yeah, really lovely to be with you all. I'm Grace. I graduated from COEX, I believe it was 2018, and actually have been connected with CDA ever since. So my practicum was actually CDA, and then here we are like 6 years later, 5 years later, which is awesome. But yeah, I have the joy of working alongside Hasi. We have very similar portfolios. We're working across the humanitarian development peace-building nexus, really focused on shifting power within those systems, and so supporting power shifts across all of that. A large part of my work is stopping as success, so we'll talk more about that today. But yeah, lovely to be with you all, and I'll pass it over to you, Melina.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here, and always nice to be in a room with my SAS colleagues. I'm Melina Villanueve. I'm from Peace Direct and calling in from London. I'm a research officer, and yeah, SAS also does take up about like half of what I do, basically. And you know, as a research officer, a lot of what I do for SAS has to do with collecting learning and understanding and the ways in which the project runs with our partners, like we're gonna, you know, dive into a bit later. But yeah, just love collecting learning, basically. So I will pass it on to my manager, Demitri.
Hi, everyone. I'm Demitri Kotsiras, and I'm the research manager at Peace Direct. So I manage basically our research portfolio, which includes all of our research on shifting power, decolonizing the system, the wider development, humanitarian, and peace-building sectors, as well as work that we do on atrocity prevention, conflict prevention, social cohesion activities, and so on. Yeah, I also manage the Peace Insight website that we use to map local peace-building organizations around the world. But yeah, with Melina and the team here, part of my my time is spent on stopping as success, support as the lead from Peace Direct side, and more than happy to talk more about that as we go along the process. So I'll pass it on to Michael.
Thanks, Demitri. Hey, everybody, I'm Michael Robinson. I work for Search for Common Ground as an institutional learning officer. And I've been at Search for about 3.5 years, maybe a little bit more now. I started in 2019, actually as a fellow, and then became staff. And for most of that time have been interested and focused on stopping a success. Now it's the bulk of my work. Have previously worked with different teams focused on Track 2 mediation, advocacy, policy, religious engagement, children and youth. And so have been able to, be involved with a lot of different work at Search, but SAS is kind of the main focus right now.
Okay. And with that, I think we'll jump in. I think Hassie's going to share our screen. And yeah, we'll jump in. So I'm going to share a little bit about CDA, and then I'll pass it off to my other colleagues. But for those who don't know, we are an independent action research organization, and we really aim to equip humanitarian development and peace building organizations, efforts, programs to be more effective and more accountable to communities and to people who are directly affected by conflict and fragility. So why us? We understand the world's crises as more compounding and increasingly complex, right? So what we're all living through day to day, the pandemics, the global health challenges, the conflict, the environmental change. And we really believe that the capacity exists to meet this moment and to move through this moment, largely between our local communities and local leaders. And we don't love that term, but just for simplicity's sake, a local or those who are most proximate to the challenges and also the global community. And so for us, we really seek to understand what works, what are the solutions, what are the possibilities from folks who are most affected in their own communities. They're also closest to the change. So we really work at all of those different levels to meet the world's crises. So in the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about like what we do, kind of what that looks like. I think Hassie, just click again. There you go. Thank you. So we really are a learning partner for organizations and communities in across these different sectors. So we're not an implementing organization. We don't have offices. We conduct research and we apply that research to organizations, to teams, to partners who are looking to be more effective and more accountable. So what this really looks like is that we really believe that people belong at the center of all that we do. We're really led by questions and informed by questions and curiosities and led by folks most proximate to the challenges. We also really believe that context matters. We have to really understand deeply what's going on and those who are experiencing it most directly to be able to address it. And we learn with our partners. We don't sort of impose or do any of that. We really want this to be a learning partnership that we have with our partners. And so we work in the humanitarian development peacebuilding sectors most specifically. We also have a part of our work that works with businesses and companies, but really our focus is across the triple nexus that's on the screen. We do have a couple approaches that we're most known for. And so when I say like when we work with teams, like what are we applying to those teams? A lot of it, so do no harm, I'm sure you're familiar with your work or in your classes, but the do no harm framework and methodology is CDA established like 25, maybe almost 30 years ago now. And we do a lot of do no harm work with our partners and conflict sensitivity as a part of that. We also look at the collective impact and do systems analysis and systems change. So really helping our partners look at the wider system and how all of the individual acts and decisions that we make as teams and in our organizations are really adding up to larger change. And we really work to connect the dots and work between those dots too in the system. We also have a host of methodologies around accountability and feedback loops, and we work with our partners to not only just work effectively, but to also, really be more accountable in the work that they're doing in the communities that they're a part of. So in our next slide, I'll talk a little bit about how that plays out. So I'm going to start with the red, so the collaborative learning projects. So really, these are large multi-year research processes that start with a question that is practitioner defined. So we don't conduct research with a hypothesis. We really seek to understand what are the really big questions, what are the really big challenges in the sector, and that folks don't have clear answers to, right? They're really complex, they sit across sectors, they're just sort of sitting as these questions. And we go through a really collaborative, iterative process to seek to answer that question, and then to develop frameworks and methodologies and tools that organizations, that partners, that teams can apply to their work to address the challenges that they're facing related to that question. So, for example, Do No Harm is a really tangible example of a collaborative learning project. Starts with a really big question around how do development and aid efforts impact conflict, and how do we mitigate harm as a result of that. And so Stopping at Success is also a collaborative learning project. You'll hear a little bit about the case studies we conducted, the feedback workshops that we used to refine them, and then the tools that we developed that we're now applying to organizations. So we're kind of that full loop within the SAS team, and you'll hear more about that in a bit. Currently, we're working on a collaborative learning project that sits across the environment, fragility, and conflict nexus. So looking at environmental peace building possibilities to meet this moment of climate and conflict challenges. And so those are some examples of that work there. And then we also have advisory partnerships. So really what we do is the frameworks and the methodologies and the tools that we have from our collaborative learning projects, we apply directly to teams, and we really help teams and organizations transform their ways of working by applying these methodologies and these tools to their work. And all of this leads us to field building and systems change that we work sort of across the system that also leads to more questions, right? So we're continually listening for what are the big questions that will then turn into a collaborative learning project, and the cycle kind of continues. I'll just briefly show you, these are some of the partners that we work with. I'll just leave them there. I don't have to go through them, but you'll see a diverse range of geographies and types and sectors. And so it kind of gives you a little bit of who we work with. And then on the next slide, just very briefly wanted to show you how we're organized as an organization, because for those of you who might be looking for internships or fellowships or consultancies, just wanted you to have a really quick insight into that. So we have a small core team. There's 6 or 7 of us at this point, but we do have a really wide network of associates who are folks that work really closely with us on a pretty consistent basis, as well as consultants. And we work with a lot of different folks on a lot of different processes, but our fellows and our internships are usually in a shorter term process, and we have those as needs and as programs arise. So we actually currently don't have anything available, but what I would say is to sign up for our newsletter, and I'll put that link in the chat, because that's where you'll see our most emerging opportunities. And yeah, then we have a really active board and advisory council that supports us in the work that we do, and as you saw, our strategic partners. So just wanted you to kind of have a sense of, when I say CDA, kind of who we are. And I will put the newsletter in the chat so that if you are interested in any opportunities, that's the best way to find us. And you can, of course, always reach out to me directly. So I'll leave it there for CDA, and I will hand it over to my Peace Direct colleagues. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to briefly present Peace Direct. We're an international charity originally based in the UK, but with 2 self-governing entities in the UK and London, and in the US with an office in Washington, DC. We, as the mission, primarily focus on supporting locally led peace building, plain and simple. So we support mainly civil society actors operating in conflict zones or fragile and conflict affected zones around the world. We were founded in 2002 in order to support and amplify the voices of local peace builders to the international community, but also try to shift power and resources in the peace building system towards locally led efforts. We originally set up as a sort of direct peace bank to directly funnel money to local peace building organizations, trying to undertake a number of activities in their context, and have shifted since to try to experiment with new resourcing models, but as well as providing advocacy and research support to shift policy and practice in favor of local efforts, and mapping out local peace building via our Peace Insight website, which I will present in a little bit. And we work directly with networks on a range of peace building issues as well. At the source of it really is that we have a belief that local civil society organizations represent the single biggest source of untapped peace building potential globally. There's a lot of attention that's paid to some of the big players historically that have operated in this space. And I know that obviously it's been shifting gears with the localization agenda and so on, but this is something that has been rooted in our belief system from the get-go since our inception in 2002. So there's values there that I can just lay out, but these are values that I think a lot of you adhere to or ascribe to, and that's nonviolence, dignity, respect, inclusion, trust, and courage. And we'd really try to work ethically and collaboratively with our partners. So we don't have any country offices. We don't try to do that. We try to work directly with the existing capacity there. And we try to just support them and facilitate and convene on their behalf with the international community. Great, if you can just pass to the next one. There you go. So just a sort of snapshot of our activities and where we focus our work. We have about 30 or so organizations that we work with. It kind of oscillates up and down depending on the programs available, but we try to stay into long-term partnerships. Some of these have been partners of ours for well over 15 years. And this is across 14 countries. You'll see a whole range there, and they're listed alphabetically. There is a higher representation of countries in Sub-Saharan Africa, but we are increasingly involved in South Asia, and we are trying to scope out new activities in places like Colombia. Then in terms of our thematic focus areas, we have atrocity prevention. We've done work on youth peace and security issues, both in terms of our advocacy in the US with the Global Youth Peace and Security Forum that's there, but also with online consultations that we host. We also have been doing quite a bit of work on peace tech and using digital technologies for peace building purposes, and that's where Peace Insight comes in. But we have spent a significant amount of time now looking at fine-tuning a resourcing model to local peace building organizations. And it's what we call the Local Action Fund. And this is working directly with hub organizations who are local peace building actors themselves, who can disperse microgrants to grassroots actors, individuals or organizations operating at the grassroots level with small microgrants to support their initiatives, and then basically filter that out and trickle it down, in a way that has real impact on the ground. And that is something that we've been increasingly adopting across many of our partner organizations and the countries we operate in order to really have the widest reach to peace building activists and actors across the globe. If you could pass on to the next slide. Yeah, so there's a figure that we have from one of our sort of seminal reports on decolonizing the aid sector. It's called Time to Decolonize Aid. And this is where we're trying to rethink how we operate in this space. And that looks at multiple functions that a peace building organization such as ourselves basically how we function in undertaking activities and doing research and engaging in strategic processes and in advocating on behalf of local peace builders. So there is a direct support and partnership accompaniment that we do with our program partners, but we also engage with resourcing models, like I mentioned, the Local Action Fund, and we do participatory research and policy advocacy with our partners, often through online consultations, so we can reach a wider group or pool of participants across the globe, or sometimes we do in-country peace exchanges, as we call them, where we look at the context at play for those peace building actors and look at what we can do to support their work going forward. They provide recommendations. We apply those to international stakeholders, decision makers internationally. And then we also do these public education engagement and activation activities. There are these activation lab kind of setups that are been undertaken in the US, where we host events where they use crafts and arts to basically try to present peace building from another lens. So it's not just entirely focused on the sort of verbose aspect of doing long form research reports and so on. Yeah, we'll go pass on to the next slide, please. And yeah, I just want to highlight one particular platform that we use. It's called Peace Insight. It's been a platform that's been live for the past 15 or so years. And it's meant to be a sort of one-stop shop for local peace building, to map organizations who otherwise don't have a presence online, but also to highlight what local peace building looks like in practice, how to support peace building and connect actors with each other, as well as with donors and funders who can fund their activities. And so we have just about 2,300 organizations mapped worldwide currently, a work in progress. I'm sure it's not the entire landscape, but we're getting there. And we work directly with a number of local peace building experts, this network of local experts who are embedded in their communities and civil society in their community, and have a good understanding of the landscape that they operate in. And so we work with them to produce articles, connect us with additional partners in their scoping phases to try to come up with new activities to support peace building organizations in those countries, and to connect them to our advocacy efforts internationally. And yeah, we'll pass on to the next slide. And yeah, to join us, you can obviously follow us on social media. You can learn and share with others. We have an online platform we use called Platform for Dialogue, where we host consultations where you can join in consultations that talk about various thematic issues. You don't have to be an expert in a particular issue in order to take part. You can even just join and observe. And we have an upcoming one around decolonizing global philanthropy. I'd be happy to share an advert link for that. Other ways, thank you, Melina, for sharing that. Great. Other ways of engaging with us is we sometimes host what we call #Peace Talks. These are either live events or events we host in a hybrid way, in person and online, with practitioners who present about their work. And that these are meant to be public events that you can engage with as well. We obviously put out events within broader pieces of work that networks kind of engage in, whether it's Alliance for Peace for Peace Buildings, PeaceCon, or the Bond Working Group in the UK that focuses on locally led development. And these are the ways for you to engage with some of these broader conferences, but those are not free necessarily to take part, unfortunately. And then we have a Peace Builder Allies program. This is something that, for those who are interested, we can connect with me, and I'll relay you to our US colleagues who have been trying to build this program focused on the supporting allies within the US who are interested in supporting peace building. And then, of course, there are internships that you can see on our job site, and we do have a fellowship program. But for more details, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be able to provide them for you. And then I'll pass on to Michael for Search for Common Ground.
Thanks, Demitri. Yeah, so I'm here to talk about Search. We call ourselves Search. And I'll make a quick distinction. Common ground is often, I think, confused with middle ground, often assumed to involve compromise. Common ground is really about transforming the way that we're approaching shared solutions. So instead of focusing on the problems, we're focusing on what we want to achieve. And we can go into a bit of our mission and vision. So we focus on conflict transformation, which is a broader process that leads to sustainable peace, not just focused on the current problems that we see today, but really aiming to shift attitudes so that involve conflict, and to transform relationships of mistrust and hatred towards collaboration and partnership, away from adversarial approaches and towards cooperative solutions. we believe that conflict is inevitable, but violence is not. And conflict is kind of natural and the result of human diversity. And when we engage with conflict adversarially, it generates polarization and violence. But when we collaborate, conflict actually can catalyze positive change and be an opportunity to transform. I think that that word is really key to the field. Originally, conflict resolution was often talked about, or conflict mitigation, different kind of meanings behind these things. But I think transformation is a much more powerful way to describe the important work that happens across Search for Common Ground and across other great organizations like CDA and Peace Direct. Our vision is a world where cooperation is the norm, where differences stimulate social progress rather than precipitate violence. And Search is involved in a lot of different ways of engaging in peace building work. We have thematic foci and track 2 mediation, children and youth work, religious engagement, various things, conflict sensitivity, related to the core principle of do no harm that Grace talked about earlier. And the way that we engage in this kind of work really ranges from convening a broad range of stakeholders, governments, civil society leaders, members of the community, bringing people for dialogue, creating opportunities to engage in dialogue in, perhaps different ways and to highlight voices that are underrepresented. And so we actually have a productions company that started, I want to say back in the 90s, actually. So we've been doing radio programming, television programming, a lot of different ways of engaging in peace building in more creative ways than I think people often think of when they think of a project. And you can go to the next one. So this slide really shows where Search currently works, where we have offices, and where we have worked. So Search is the largest dedicated peace building organization, and we have 29 countries that we have offices in. And you can kind of see the dots represent the offices. So we actually have 52 offices. So some of the countries that we work in, we've had really long-term partnerships and, built, connections in various areas. But we're also kind of focusing away from a conflict model that's country-based and more to geography-based. So really looking at conflict because it happens across borders. It's not just defined within one country. And I think the way that countries are defined by their borders is also a very complicated history and exacerbates conflicts. In terms of who we partner with, we have 932 local partners. And in terms of our staff, 83% of the people that work at Search are local to the country that they work in. And you can go to the next one. So I mentioned earlier, I'm on the institutional learning team at Search. And so one of the things that we do is really try to understand how we can build this field and build evidence for this field. Peace building isn't as well defined as development. It isn't as well defined as the humanitarian field. It's newer. And, part of being newer, part of collaborating with others is that you learn a lot and you learn a lot differently. And so I think, one of the ways that we've tried to create some coherence and tried to align some of our learning internally and externally has been through a peace impact framework. The first pillar of this is focused around lived experience. And by that, we mean connecting with communities and really allowing our teams to engage with people so that they're able to define some indicators for what matters most to them. So, when I talk about indicators, I'm talking about, specific measures of success for a project that can be, tracked, monitored, whatever it may be. Often those are written by either donors or project teams rather than communities themselves. And so we're engaging in processes that work directly with communities so that they have a say in how, a project is evaluated and deemed successful. One other aspect of that, in addition to, having these locally grounded indicators, is having some aligned measures and indicators that can be tracked more consistently across different geographies and across all of Search's work. And it's not to say that we, add these indicators where they don't fit. It's just a pool to work from and to have different examples. And within these aligned measures, we have 5 themes. So they cover physical violence, personal agency, institutional legitimacy, polarization, and resource investment. And the third pillar of our peace impact framework is around shared reflection. So this one is really about outcome harvesting, determining what's happening and what's being learned, whether that's positive, negative, intended, unintended. All of that can be really useful, but then not just stopping at reflection and moving into an adaptation space, so that you're constantly engaged with this and not remaining stagnant. And then this next slide introduces a platform that's really houses a lot of Search's resources, and that's Connexus. It's a global learning coordination and impact platform. And originally we had a platform that merged into Connexus that was more of a resource library. This, you can see some of the key features. Resources are one really prominent feature within this. And I think for students, it's really interesting to take a look at Connexus and explore some of the themes and, see what resources may be useful for you. But you can also create a user profile. So you can actually, engage in discussion forums. There's a job board that you can look for jobs. You can connect with people. So this platform is really broader than what Search had in previous years. So recommend everyone to check that out. And the link is provided. It's cnxus.org. But you can also get connected through Search's website. And I think we have one more slide. So we do have one opportunity, an internship opportunity based in DC this summer. There may be more that get added, but I imagine this is, likely the one that'll be posted for the summer, at least in DC. And it's a paid internship. Applications are due by the 3rd, and it's with our global program development team. So really cool team, and global program development means, a ton of different things. So you could be doing a lot of different cool work. So, recommend people to check that out and look at other jobs in the future, or, more permanent jobs through our jobs page. And I'll hand it over to Melina.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Michael. Now that you've heard about the 3 organizations that make up Stopping at Success, which, all 3 of us do a lot, it makes sense that we would have be running a project that is as thorough and collaborative as Stopping at Success really is. And on a personal note, I would like to say I have loved working with every single person that is part of the SAS Consortium, because it's just been a wonderful experience. This is us in DC in September. We had a few days workshopping, all of us, for the upcoming year for SAS. And, I think now it's a good time to really dive into what it is that SAS is and what do we do and how people can get involved. Next slide, please. So SAS Plus, as of today, is in its 2nd iteration. Nearly made it. With the first iteration having taken place from 2017 to 2020. So this is now technically SAS 2.0, running from 2021 to 2025 and funded by USAID. In essence, SAS is a way for 3 organizations like ours to come together and apply the learning that we have accumulated from our own individual organizational work to facilitate development transitions from international to local actors that would that basically come to us through the fact that we are a USA funded project, but also from putting ourselves out there, like events like today. So next slide, please. our main goals, really, as I said, it's seeking to enhance development, and basically we want development partnerships to be a lot more locally led, with a focus on a lot of the agency coming from civil society organizations or local organizations who are a lot more involved and in the day-to-day of the area in which they live and the conflict which they may be facing. And we believe that in order for transitions to be more effective and sustainable for the local actors, there needs to be this locally led focus and lens. In order as well for there to be a much stronger engagement with communities in which they work in, this kind of transition is something that we think will actually enhance, like I said, the development of these networks that may be already in place, but also the individual organizations and actors that make up the communities in which this type of work is necessary. Next slide, please. Great. So I know that was just a lot of words with enhancing development, local, community, et cetera, but we have substantial evidence to support our goal that local leadership is the key to successful development. And this evidence comes from the first iteration of SAS, in which there were 19 case studies that were written and created, which covered 13 countries, which you can all see are listed there. And from these case studies, there were 6 thematic papers that were created that concern any and all things that go into organizational life and how to sustain an organization without putting pressure on the people that would run an organization, but also in order for it to be effective in the work that it does. So these papers include financial sustainability, communication methods, capacity development, and even strengthening, identifying leaders and champions for various regions or themes that go hand in hand with development, creating power and legitimacy as a new organization, and how to enhance partnerships on a regional level. A lot of the organizations that we work with, because it's leadership transitions, will have had this association in name and in programs with bigger organizations that are either based in the global north or just a lot bigger. And so when there's this transition that happens, there now needs to be this redevelopment almost of not just their branding, but also where is their legitimacy coming from when they go out to communities and do the work that is necessary. And so, again, from these thematic papers as well, we have developed tools and resources that really are there to support INGOs, civil society organizations or non-governmental organizations, and donors as well, who are planning to do this transition process or who are even just considering it. And it's tools that, we are in the process of evaluating, reiterating. We are constantly learning from the partnerships that we currently hold on ways in which we can really strengthen those tools that we have and ultimately make them as practical as possible, and certainly not outdated. That's something to, big no-no. Next slide, please. So we have 2 forms of, accompaniment, but I think there's 2 prongs with which we approach the work that we do. There's long-term accompaniment, which is longer. It's something in which we're really working hand in hand with both the whether it's the international organization that is facilitating or creating a transition for a more local chapter to become its own entity. That's something in which we are there from the start of the conversation of starting a transition and follow through while using the tools and resources that were created in the first iteration. And then there's the shorter term accompaniment, which is more of a help desk. You know, if you can envision it, it's more, yeah, definitely more of a help desk. And the idea there is that, you know, sometimes it may be that an organization may not need complete hands-on support the way that we may be able to provide it, but instead actually just one or two tools or resources that may be necessary for them to maybe rethink their strategy or come up with a new strategy. So again, when it comes to like flexibility and constant learning, you know, this is where we are in essence always trying to understand like what constitutes a more help desk type of accompaniment and what constitutes a longer term, you know, transition process accompaniment. And there's no, you know, frankly, there's no clear answer to it. It really depends on where an organization is, what their vision is, and their capacity as well, like what they're able to do in that moment. So it's a constant, discussion. Next slide, please. As it stands, we have two organizations that we're like supporting in developing a transition strategy. We've got one network leadership transition, 2 USAID mission funded transition awards, and 2 international to local NGO transitions. I myself am overseeing one of the international to local NGO transitions in Nigeria. I'm happy to kind of open the floor to my SAS colleagues as well if they want to, if you want to say a few words about maybe like where your accompaniment partners are in this list. But if that's not the case, you know, I also think it is quite straightforward in terms of showing that we, again, it's not a one size fits all type of process. And it varies from networks to organizations to transitions of leadership to even two USAID mission funded transition awards. So Michael, Grace, Hasi, Demitri.
You covered it, Melina. Yeah, I mean, I think we're just trying to really intentionally have as diverse set of partnerships as possible so that we really can like test our tools in different ways and make sure that what we sort of walk away with at the end of the award is, you know, robust and applicable across the sector. So that's sort of the rationale for the different makeups. But yeah, no, I don't have much more to add, Melina. Yeah, I don't know about others. But...
Yeah, Michael?
I'll just jump in, not necessarily related to our accompaniment partnerships, but I first learned about Stopping as Success when I was a student. And I think one thing that I've been reflecting on is that the core concept, you know, stopping as success, the impact of your work, not just being defined within, you know, meeting certain project milestones and activities, but really about the impact that's left and the sustainability that can be had from that impact. That sounds very intuitive, but actually engaging in this work, it takes a lot of intentionality. You know, there's a lot that this system, this wider development system, is a pretty well-oiled machine, and it doesn't work properly in every way. And this really is a reinvention of how we're engaged in this work and how we're thinking about the long-term sustainability and equity in this field. And so I think that this project and you know, my colleagues in this consortium are really at a unique time in the field and well placed to kind of engage in a lot of discussions and collaborate with others beyond even focused on transitions.
Well, couldn't have said it any better. Yeah, thanks, Michael, for this. You know, this is the people I work with. It's great. So yeah, that's where we're at right now. In 2022, hopefully 2023, we get to have a few more accompaniment partners, but that will depend on, you know, what happens. Next slide, please. So now's the fun part where we get to give out our details and hope that you message us if you want to get involved. So we've got the Stopping as Success website, stoppingassuccess.org, where you can find literally everything that I mentioned so far. You've got the newsletter as well, which is the next one is coming up very soon as well. So something to look out for. And then the three organizations that make up the consortium, CDA, Search, and Peace Direct. And I will say as well, as someone, I started at Peace Direct about 6 months ago, and you know, like kind of halfway into, not halfway, but the second iteration was well underway. And I watched this fantastic video on the Stopping at Success website, which features Grace explaining everything. And I was like, great, I have no more questions. I'm ready to go to DC and meet everyone. So with that, I think that's it. Is there another slide, or is that, yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Melina. I think we have like 10-ish minutes for questions. So if you have any questions or if it's sparking thoughts that you all want to chat with each other about, we welcome, any of that. Thank you.
So while the students put on their thinking caps, I thought I would share my screen real quick and just kind of show the reach of Heller. Let me pull this up. So, I mean, obviously we have Grace, who is at CDA Collaborative, right? So each of these organizations that have been discussed has a Heller representative. So we have Grace at CDA, and then when we take a look at Search for Common Ground, Michael, I don't know if you know Hend, but she is an amazing person. And finally, over at, Peace Direct, we have someone who on the board there. So I just thought it would be important to highlight, not toot our own horn, but to show the students the capacity that you have here. So hopefully you found value in that. Okay.
Thanks,
Do you work with her, Michael?
I don't, but I do remember when she was first introduced into the organization and kind of the type of work that she was focused on. It just seemed very exciting. So yeah, I'll have to connect with her.
Very wonderful. Good for you. Thank you. From the students, are there any questions? If you don't feel comfortable putting yourself on camera, you're welcome to type into the chat as well. So don't feel pressured there. But otherwise, I'll wait for those students. Demitri, Grace, Hasi, Melina, and Michael, I want to thank you so much for this. Was an awesome presentation. I want to give you an A+ there. Very informative, a lot of information to take in. But I love the enthusiasm, your knowledge, and camaraderie among one another. So thank you for being here and presenting this information to our students.
I think Mary has unmuted.
Yeah, thank you. And I have to second everything that Bryan said. Thank you so much. This was so incredibly informative, and I love learning about each of your organizations and the work that you do. I was wondering if maybe a couple of you could talk a little bit about your own trajectories and sort of how you got to where you are, and maybe some other of you could talk a little bit about the skills that you think are really important for people sort of at mid-level entering the field, like some of the ones that you think that are really critical. Thank you.
Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mentioned I started out as a fellow at Search for Common Ground. That opportunity was after I'd kind of been familiar with some of the organizations in the field, saw Search and peace building as the area that I kind of was interested in. And there was an info session kind of like this at my school. And I connected with the person who held that. I think a year and a half later, they were my supervisor. It was Marin for the people in this consortium. Marin was on the SAS project as well. And I think, you know, from having the fellowship, which was like 6 months, not a guaranteed anything afterwards, It took looking for opportunities beyond the people that I worked with. So connecting with different parts of the organization, because even if that, isn't super relevant to your job, if you're able to have time and focus on something, it might be able to help you explore other passions. But it definitely can help build champions within the organization that can advocate for you, that can say, hey, I saw that this person's, internship is ending in a few weeks. What are we doing about that? And that's really important in this field. So definitely look for those opportunities.
I think next, my trajectory is a little bit different to a lot of folks here. I started in my country working as a humanitarian, officer, responding to crisis situations and kind of learning through that process and kind of being at the front lines of the work. And from there, it took me to different places, building my skills and connections. I think a lot of the work in our sector really depends on relationships that you build, especially with the people you're working for and the people you're working with. Really, so I think a lot of that really helped me to eventually find CDA, where I feel like I really fit in, because my personal interest is also academic interest, professional, all of that kind of sits within the intersectionality of what CDA does. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
Thank you. It's great.
Something that I'll add, I think in terms of the skills for this sector, I mean, I think one of the things that, at least for us in SAS, we talk a lot about, like, we want to work in a sector that doesn't really exist yet, right? Like a sector that is reflective of the shifts in power that we want to see, right? Or the like really being truly locally led. Like, we're up against a lot of these really intense systems that were rooted in all of the things that we all know. And so I do think that it does take a lot to sustain this work day to day. So I do think another skill is having a lot of sort of awareness about what's going on, how you want to be a part of the change, and also how you take care of yourself and sustain the work as you go, because I do think a lot of us are in it for the long haul, and that we're pushing up against a lot of powerful systems that want to stay the same. And so I do think being in relationship with each other, being really collaborative, like leaning on each other's skills and abilities. And, I think that one of the things I love about our SAS team is that we can do that really, really naturally. If one's having a bad day, someone else can like pick up. If one's having, if one's like, I don't know how to work through this, like, I think leaning on each other and finding the people who are in it with you, and how to sustain yourself as you go, I think is a skill that I think it's one of those less tangible skills. Yeah. Marwa, am I pronouncing your name correctly? I saw you maybe have a hand. I didn't know if you wanted to come in.
I have question for us, especially we are like student. How should I start? Because of my I worked before in peace environment, and also I work as a lecturer at university. So I want to start looking for organization. So I need advice from your experience, and I see that you are still young and you have like great experience. So how should I start?
I mean, just to chime in, first, because the thing is in most organizations is that there's multiple functions that you can play. It's not just like there's one road into an organization and that's it, right? So I happen to be jumping into research. I was dabbling in various bits from advocacy to campaigning and these kind of things, and then shifted into something that's a bit more grounded research, practical elements versus amplifying voices. But you may find an interest in monitoring and evaluating aspects of work to see whether there's the demonstrable impact, or you might be interested in fundraising for programs. That's always a need for across most organizations. To say, this is where I would like our organization to focus their work, and here are the opportunities in order for us to finance that. And then there are all kinds from, you said you're a lecturer, obviously lots of opportunities in organizations that focus on providing training seminars, these kind of things on various thematic issues or even functions. And that's another aspect of the sector that you can jump into. You just have to kind of decide first where you want to focus your time and efforts, because some functions are more of interest to you and others might not be. And then obviously you can then tailor that to your existing strengths as well. And that way you're able to be more competitive in that space and sell yourself a bit more effectively.
I guess just to build on that, I think that I think I agree with what Demitri said 100%. There's a few kind of avenues that you can take. If you want to work for a particular organization, obviously being interested in multiple positions, maybe not aligning with what you want to do long term, but maybe something that could get you there. Also, if they don't have job postings that sound interesting at all, look at their partners. I think we all shared a list of our partners in this, and there's a lot. So that's another way that you can get familiar with an organization, is by working with their collaborators. You can also decide if you want to do a really specific type of work, and then you're opening yourself up to a lot of different organizations, maybe even a different field than you're interested in. I kind of took the track of interested in an organization to get into M&E work. Before, I was more in the kind of project implementation side of things, is where I thought I'd be going, but saw opportunities and kind of have built from there.
I know we're at time, but I did just want to say too that the Heller network is really strong and very wide. So I have become like in love with LinkedIn like since Heller, because I do really think that you can type in, like, if you want to look at a geography, if you want to look at particular type of job, if you want to look at this organization, like, chances are pretty good that someone at Heller or someone who knows someone at Heller is connected to those spaces. And I find that folks really do want to help other folks. And so I think if you're able to also just say, like, I'm really keen to like work on this thing or be in this sector, or like if you're able to even articulate it a little bit and then connect with folks about that, I really think people want to help people get where they want to go for the most part. So I would really encourage leaning into the Heller network too, because I do find it quite strong. That's helpful. And I know we're at time, Bryan, so sorry.
Yeah. Is that helpful, Marwa? Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Good. And the Career Center is happy to help you as well. So come and connect with us. But anyway, I want to thank everyone once again for being here today, students and our panelists, our staff. I thought that this was a great presentation. So thank all of you for being here. And it doesn't end here. I look forward to following up. So once again, thank you so very much for being here. Everyone have a great day. And to the students going to class, bless you. Take a little bit of a break before you jump right back into class. So take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.